Okay. Howdy.
Hey, Mel.
Hey, Dr. Torres. How are
Hey,
you?
all.
Hey, Nate. What's
Hey,
up? So today, for this episode of This Week in BS, Dr. Torres is back on my channel, so yay! And also Nate Broady is back on my channel again, so yay! They're gluttons for punishment, I think.
We love it. We love it. That's what.
It's great. Thanks for having me.
So there's been all kinds of new stuff that's come out with abortion law. You know, we're kind of like, it's getting a bit scary, I think. There's more talk about overturning Roe versus Wade and that sort of thing. And we've touched on this before, but there's so much rhetoric that's going out there saying that this is a goal, that people are wanting to completely get rid of Roe v. Wade. So
Yeah, absolutely. Also, if they could take back the right to vote for us, that would also be a thing that they would do. I mean, that's just a little less feasible, but yeah, it's absolutely a thing that they're trying to do, and they're using the same tactics from the same playbook from, I guess, the past couple of centuries, really, which involves, misinformation I've been thinking a lot about the suffragist movement, especially in the 100-year anniversary of ratifying the 19th Amendment. These laws are not based in science. They're not based in fact. And it's frightening because these laws actually put real lives in danger. And I think it's inexcusable that society as a whole does not come out in droves and say, we will not have our fellow citizens harmed.
it is kind of scary.
Yeah, I could.
Go ahead, Nate. Sorry.
No, I was saying I couldn't. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%, Dr. Torres. I think a lot of our laws are just misogynistic, from a time past. And I think, the ruling class doesn't want to give control over women's bodies, and they have to understand that now we're supposed to be in a way more civilized and more cultural and even more academic. Oops, sorry. I'm here with my kid. I'm sorry. But we're supposed to be more culturalized and more academic, but we're not. We're still in this misogynistic world. And I think these laws, especially these anti-abortion laws, are indicative of that, are indicative of men still wanting control over what little they have over women's bodies. And that's what we need to overcome as a society.
Okay, so really quickly, I didn't give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. So, Dr. Torres, let's start with you. Tell people who you are, what you do, and where they can find you.
I'm not telling anyone where they can find me. No, I'm just kidding.
Fair enough.
No. So, Dr. Leah Torres, OBGYN, and really my biggest presence is on Twitter, to be honest. Leah N. Torres is my handle. I've been an OBGYN for like a lot of years. I've been in the reproductive justice movement for almost as many years. And really what I aspire to do is use my education and knowledge and impart that into the public realm, the public sphere that is social media, in order to educate people so that we can be a better society that values fellow human beings. And I do some pap smears and C-sections too, so that's another thing.
Okay.
My name is.
Go for it, Nate.
My name is Nate. I'm sorry because I'm here with I got a sick kid with me, so we're running back and forth into the bathroom, and But I'm happy to be here. I'm out. Obviously, I'm a lawyer. I used to teach. I was a law school lecturer, and I used to teach at a law school here in New York. I used to teach everything from constitutional law to family law to property law. And I'm here on YouTube. I'm great friends with Mel, who I've been a big fan for years. And I'm also a big fan of Dr. Torres on Twitter because I see she's always fighting a good fight. So, that's what I do and that's who I am.
Awesome. And you have lots of YouTube videos that you do that center around law. So check out his stuff. There's a bit of an echo. Is that from? Are you hearing that on your end?
I'm hearing an echo, but I'm muting. So.
Oh, okay. I'm not certain. Okay. Yeah, we can check into that.
I can mute as well.
Oh, okay. All right. It's okay. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's okay. All right. So there's lots of different things that come out. If you have questions in the chat, please feel free to just toss them out at us while we're going through this. It'll be all right. So let's talk a little bit. I know there was a bill, I believe, that was coming out. I think it was in Alabama. I think it was Alabama where they were going to have mandatory vasectomies for men after the age of 40. Let me see. Let's see. Mandatory vasectomies. And people were saying that's too old to stop. They need to be like, sooner than that. And I think the whole purpose of that bill was to try to make a point about not having control over your body. So yeah, it was a Alabama lawmaker. Let me get her name. She proposed this mandatory vasectomies for men turning 50, not 40, 50. And Ted Cruz got upset about this. So
I mean, you can clearly see her target audience, right? Our legislators are men generally approaching, if not over 50. And it was, yes, to make a point. And, many other similar, bills are proposed like this to make a point because people are not seeing that the anti-abortion, anti-healthcare bills are also as ridiculous, but also dangerous. And so it's absolutely to make a point in order to demonstrate how wrong these other proposals are that are made by generally legislators who are men over 50.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I don't really see this as as something that's viable. The lawmaker was Rolanda Hollis. She's a Democrat in Alabama. And so this is what Hollis says in the text of the bill. It says, under existing law, there are no restrictions on the reproductive rights of men. This bill would require a man to undergo a vasectomy within 1 month of his 50th birthday or the birth of his third biological child, whichever comes first. So Ted Cruz was upset and he said, yikes, a government big enough to give you everything is big enough to take everything literally. Alabama Democrat proposes bill mandating all men have vasectomy at age 50 or after third child. Well, see, but here's what's funny. They put all of this, when you compare it to women and our reproductive rights, they take away a lot of the responsibility that men play a role in the pregnancy. We're told that we are to undergo this body changing experience. It changes your body forever. The only way to fix most of that is lots of surgery. So, I mean, that's what happens. Your body gets pushed. I mean, your muscles shift, things change, the shape of your body changes, your skin changes. You even lose some of your resources, and sometimes it can even shorten your life a bit having a baby, depending. So, there's some evolutionary studies associated with that, to where a mother gives up a lot of her own resources to funnel it to the child, which can in turn shorten their lives. But there's no responsibility whatsoever from the men involved. So if we're going to control women's bodies, we have to make certain the thing that causes pregnancy is regulated as well. What are your thoughts on that? I know Dr. Torres has weighed in. What do you think about all this, Nate?
You know what? I think it's all about personal responsibility. And, I'm kind of a libertarian in this sense, where I think, personal freedom should be paramount. I should be able to choose what I want to do with my body. And if these laws are constricting that in some way, it reminds me more of like the Eastern European bloc, when they had the forced labor camps and stuff like that, where women were forced to have babies under these horrible conditions. And it's in this sense, I'm more willing to have the government out of the choice between a woman and a doctor, or even a man and his doctor for these particular things. But it seems like the other side, when it comes to conservatives, are just so focused in on, on one end, they don't want the government to tell you what to do when it comes to, one of the many things that they say, something like, and I can't even think about the example. But in one instance, they'll tell you, we want the government out of our lives. Ronald Reagan used to always say, less government, less government. But then on the opposite end, they want the government in my lives, in my bedroom, which it's just not, it doesn't make any sense. So if we're talking about just personal freedoms and being able to choose what you want to do with your bodies, I think any of these laws are ridiculous. I think it just should be left up to the individual and to the medical professional what is best for that person in that situation.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think that's something everybody can agree on. I think ultimately what it comes down to. So it's coming back again with the Roe versus Wade kind of fear. What is the likelihood? I know you've discussed this before, Nate, with Dr. Torres on another episode of this show. It's coming up again. What is the likelihood that something like that is going to be overturned? And then if it is, we can, holler over at Dr. Torres here and have her chime in on how that's going to affect her work.
Well, the legal argument against Roe versus Wade is that Roe versus Wade, or the principle of Roe versus Wade, will probably never truly be overturned nationally. In other words, the difference with Roe versus Wade established is at the federal level. A woman has the right to choose, right? So there were some states even before Roe versus Wade that made abortions legal because they were saying, well, women at the state level have that right. Now, what Roe versus Wade was saying, well, this doesn't make sense. This should be a constitution. This right is protected in the Constitution. So every state and every territory in the United States should also recognize this as a fundamental right, and women should have that right no matter what state you have. So overturning Roe v. Wade, what it would do is let states like Alabama outlaw abortion. But some places like New York would still have the same laws and still have that same rights. So the legal fight is really over nationalized, this being a nationalized right versus a state right. I think it's possible. And honestly, I think if we elect Trump for another term and he puts up another Supreme Court justice, which is likely, each president probably gets about one pick per term, then you do have an argument because Justice Clarence Thomas has been on record saying he wants it overturned. Alito has been on record saying he's overturned. You have enough. I think you do have enough conservative Supreme Court justices where it just takes 5 votes to now say that this right is not a nationalized right, but a state right. And states like Alabama will then start restricting this. Will then make these laws permanent.
Okay. Golly. All right. Why don't you weigh in on this, Dr. Torres? How is this going to affect if they were to not make it a national right versus keeping it as exclusively a state right? How is that going to affect your practice, do you think? Oh, no problem.
There we go. Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
So if people do not have the right to make their own medical decisions regarding the risks that they undertake in their own health and life, I don't know how we'll have any doctors doing anything legally. I mean, it's a basic fundamental aspect of medicine, which is to respect patient autonomy. And part of patient autonomy is to say to a pregnant person, what would you like to do? Would you like to stay pregnant? Would you like to not stay pregnant? If you would like to stay pregnant, here's what to expect. Here are some real things that can happen in pregnancy and birth. Honestly, we probably don't do that well enough. I don't think people understand what could go wrong in a pregnancy and birth, but we do that because we're sensitive to people's desires to build their family, and we will deal with complications as they come along. But yes, their bodies are going to be forever changed because of going through an entire pregnancy and giving birth. Forever changed. There are risks that they will undergo. Hopefully everything turns out fine, but no one has a crystal ball and can predict that. So in effect, for the government to say federally or state-wise, you do not get to decide what risks of health and life that you are going to undergo, that's a concept that is unconscionable to me. Like, I don't understand how that could even be a thing. And I don't know what physician would be able to provide evidence-based healthcare in that situation.
Yeah. This is starting to walk a pretty scary line. So if the government can intervene in between a doctor and a patient saying you can't treat your patient for this particular thing, who's to stop them for other things? So as far as I know, this is like the only medical thing that's associated that the government seems to regulate outside of controlled substances, which rightly so, controlled substances are a bit different and they do have, risks. But I mean, this is kind of like territory that I'm not familiar with. I don't know. Nate, are there any other laws that we can think of where the government has plays a role in medicine or in interfering between doctor and patient?
Well, I think, what we're talking about, we can talk about everything from drugs that are prescribed to, I know if you're in the Army, you can't do certain things like cut your hair because they consider that to be an offense. So I think when you're talking about the government intervention into personal liberties, it really has to be a real important government, it has to be important enough where the government, when they do intervene, they have a real important purpose or they call it strict scrutiny. There has to be some overwhelming reason why you want to do it. And the reason why they say they want to intrude in this particular sphere is because of, the right to life or the right to the child's life. And it's always coached in this, the child's life versus the parent's life or the woman's life, and which is the government going to protect. And even in Roe versus Wade, the court made the argument that if you're talking about the right of the child versus the right of the mother, the whole case is really determined based on early on in the pregnancy, the rights of the mother are superseded the rights of the child. But then when the child becomes viable, the rights of the child then start eventually superseding the rights of the mother. And that's kind of the way the government looks at the abortion issue on the federal level. But I think also, if we're just talking about government intrusion and like, for instance, there are certain things that you can't do to your own body that would be illegal. And I think you mentioned drug use, for instance.
Right.
But also self-mutilation, suicide is actually illegal in some states too. So so there are some examples, but I don't think it's anything as intrusive as, making abortion illegal. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I've been pulling up I've been pulling up some information, and particularly in an area where I live, the area where I live, probably about 10 years ago, had an infant mortality rate that rivaled that of a third world country. I mean, there were third world countries that had better preparation for their infants than a city neighboring where I live. It was rivaling.
That's insane.
Yeah, I'll send it to you at some point in time if you like, Dr. Torres. I'll send you. There was an expose article done with one of the news papers here, and we have children's hospitals. We have some of the most emerging, awesome technology. That world-renowned technology comes out of our city, but these people don't have access to prenatal care. They don't have access to a safe environment to give birth to their babies. I mean, it's a zip code. A zip code in this city had infant mortality rates that rivaled that of a third world country, to the point the state had to step in and go, why are these babies dying? I mean, people were just having them in their house and burying the bodies in the backyard. It's kind of like that. I mean, stillborn babies. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So the thing that kind of just blows my mind is that they don't want to fund Planned Parenthood. They don't want to have abortion be legal. You know, they don't want any kind of safe practices made available, particularly for these women. And a large percentage of these women are African American women. And so it's like, when you look at the statistics, those are the individuals who are going to suffer if we don't keep abortion safe and legal. That's a lot of what I've been pulling up with statistics on the World Health Organization. You can look at, who is another one? Where was it? I think reproductiverights.org. You can get all of this information readily available. So if we're going to make abortion illegal, what are we going to do with all these babies that are dying, when they're born, or the mothers? How are we not going to take care of them too? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, you know that it's not about the children.
Right.
We know this, because if it were about the children, we would not have the maternal mortality rate and the neonatal mortality and morbidity rates that we have. This would not be a thing. If it were actually about the children, that would not be a crisis that we're having in this nation. We would actually have parental leave. We would have support in pregnancy. People who are pregnant would not be losing their jobs because they're pregnant. If we actually cared about the pregnancy and then the subsequent children that are birthed from those pregnancies, we wouldn't have the shame surrounding breastfeeding in public. We wouldn't have any of this stuff if we actually valued children. There wouldn't be, in some states, 1 in 4 children who are food scarce, living in poverty, not knowing when their next meal is going to happen, not knowing if they have shelter for the night. These would not be issues if we actually cared about children and their parents. We don't. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, isn't one of the jokes that the Republicans don't want, the conservatives, they want to force the women to have the baby, but then after they have the baby, they don't want to take care of it, so they want to cut welfare and cut all the substance after the baby's out. But then before the baby's, so it's like it's a double-edged sword. You want to force these people to have the kids, but then you don't want to help them take care of the kids when the kids are born. So it's, it literally puts, like you're saying, low-income women and low-income families in no-win scenarios.
Exactly. And we can't ignore the systemic racism that accompanies our healthcare system that is also sexist. So you've got racism, sexism, the misogyny, and we have a higher maternal mortality rate of Black mothers than we do white mothers. Of people of color are dying more frequently in pregnancy than white women. You cannot separate all of those issues. They all intersect, and they intersect with family planning access. When you can plan your pregnancy, that is the healthiest pregnancy. That is the optimal health situation. When you plan to get pregnant, then become pregnant, you are optimizing the pregnancy and health outcome of both the pregnant person and the child. So when you cut off access to insurance, to healthcare access, of course you're going to cut off access to everything else that follows and decrease health outcomes. So if you were really interested, if we were a society really interested in all of these fetuses, like these legislators pretend that they are, then there would be, here, you get health insurance and you get health insurance, and here's your doctor for prenatal care, and here's your doctor for prenatal. Like, that would be a thing, but it's not.
You sounded like Bernie Sanders.
Right? Oh, I know. I'm just, yeah, now crucify me on the stage of the, like, it's just the hypocrisy that needs to be pointed out that nobody's seeming to see, or at least they're willfully ignoring. It's mind-blowing.
But Dr. Torres, if I can ask though, what about the counter argument? Because here in New York, they have the counter argument that the policy of having abortions is racist, it's population control. Since most of the minorities are the ones who are getting this thing, then you're inherently, killing babies who you don't like. While white people don't usually get abortions as frequently as minorities, this is a way to control that population. What do you say to those critics?
I say you can't oppress a people and then say that they're not accessing the healthcare from which you have oppressed them. It all stems from the inherent systemic racism that is in our nation, and that goes to healthcare access, that goes to access to contraception. No one goes around making people have abortions. I mean, that attitude presupposes that there's someone going around and knocking on Black people's doors and saying, let's have an abortion today. That's not how it works. But when there's a systemic discrepancy between access in healthcare of minorities, lower socioeconomic status, that has a ripple effect that then it's no surprise if you can't get access to healthcare and you can't get access to contraception, then maybe you're going to need access to an abortion because you can't get the contraception that you need. It's a systemic issue where the root cause you can't ignore about the socioeconomic discrepancies that happen to be based in a lot of racism and a lot of misogyny.
I mean, you can't separate that at all. I mean, there's no other intrusive medical things that are associated with men. I mean, now given there are some biases associated when you get into where children go with parents, parents split up, historically, they've always given the kids to the moms in a lot of those cases. I could be wrong, Nate, on that. So if I'm wrong, call me out on that. But there's
you're 100% right. But it actually is a famous case where the judge told a guy who was a stay-at-home father that he needed to get a job and turn the kid over to the mom. And it was overturned by the Supreme Court because they said that was a sexist policy.
Right. So we do have sexist policies on both sides of that, to where we're basically saying, well, mothers are the only ones that should be caring for the kids and not the dads. Dads don't deserve to have the kids. Mothers need to have the kids because kids should always be with the mothers. So let's remove that. Coming from a single parent home myself, my parents, when they split, they ended up in chancery court, not family court. And so my dad ended up having to pay $300 a month for 3 kids. That's it. He regularly stayed unemployed, but my mother had to give him $100 every month and an equity check for the house. So it's like, if she didn't do it, she was in contempt. He didn't do it all the time, and it was like a runaround hassle thing. So it's just like, it's maddening because there's sexism everywhere throughout this entire whole process. Dads should be allowed to have, custody of their kids, not just based on gender. They should have a role in that. And we should also stop trying to force people to have babies that nobody's going to take care of or give them access to proper health care. It's frustrating for me because we have some of the most amazing medical technology and people don't have access to it. They don't. But, hey, let's make them have babies. And then we're going to absolutely just, forget about it. And then you've got issues with schools. So the teacher in me is coming out. I'm just telling y'all, teacher in me is coming out. I've taught in high schools. It's just, you have there's so much. I have so many feelings, and I'm trying to put them all into words, and it's just really hard.
Tell us, sister. Tell us.
People, it's like when I had an episode with Monty and Hannibal when we were talking about IQ and race, Jordan Peterson and Stefan Molyneux. We're like, IQ and race are like, no, it has to do with resources. It has to do with access to resources. So we're not funneling money into the appropriate schools if they don't show any kind of, growth. We're like, well, your kids aren't getting any smarter, so we're not going to give your school any more money. And then we're going to go through and roll back on all the nutrition stuff and say, make kids with they can't afford to pay for their lunch. So we're just going to give them some bread and throw some peanut butter or whatever on it and just hand it to them because they don't deserve hot lunch because they can't pay for their past lunch, even though we have a lunch program, but that's being rolled back. So it's like, it makes me nuts because this is absolutely not about having kids and taking care of kids. This is 100% let's control people's bodies because they just don't care about the kids.
I have a question. I have two questions for Nate, actually. One, Nate, could you speak to, because there's all these anti-abortion laws and we know that they're ridiculous and they're not based in science, but could you speak to the either human rights or even constitutional rights, if there is a violation thereof, when people are forced to continue a pregnancy and give birth and undergo those health and life risks? So that's one question. For like a minor, for example, who doesn't have parental consent and therefore must remain pregnant and give birth. That's one question. The second question is, how does the Supreme Court have justices that are either conservative or liberal? Like, how is that a thing on the Supreme Court?
Well, for the Supreme Court questions, it all depends on who nominates them, right? If a conservative person nominates conservatives, that's kind of how you get that conservative swing with the Supreme Court.
But isn't justice blind?
Justice is blind, but policies to get to justice isn't blind, though, unfortunately.
Right. That's kind of what gets me, is that there are Supreme Court justices and they have leanings. Like, shouldn't there be no leanings in the Supreme Court as far as political identity?
That's the goal, but the actuality is no. Like, Clarence Thomas is obviously heavily leaning toward the conservative principles because that is who he is, So it's difficult to judge things without going to your experiences. But unfortunately, that's what we have. We have a male-predominated Supreme Court who are making these policies with this misogynistic undertone, in the way they adjudicate these things. But to your second question now, the way the laws are usually written, it doesn't say that abortion is illegal. The what they do to make it illegal is saying the doctors who perform it are committing an illegal act. So for instance, the way I think even in Alabama now, the law is if a doctor performs the abortion, they get 99 years in prison. That's more than if you murdered somebody. You get more time for performing an abortion than you would if you actually gunned somebody down in the middle of the street. You can only get 20 or 25 years for that. So that's how they do it. So receiving an abortion actually wouldn't be illegal. It would be the person performing it, and that's how they stop it. Is because now if you perform an abortion, you get 99 years in prison. Who's going to perform the abortion? So that's how generally the laws work to make it so abortion would be illegal.
But when someone who wants an abortion and can't have one is therefore forced to give birth against their will, isn't that some sort of constitutional rights violation, human rights violation? I mean, it's got to be a thing.
The violation isn't against the person because they're not saying it's illegal to have an abortion. It's illegal to somebody to perform the abortion. I know it sounds like a distinction without a difference, but it's just like, if I tell everybody, if you do this, you're going to be arrested. But then I'm saying to the woman, just because you can't get one doesn't mean that I'm depriving you of any right. I'm just depriving people, the medical professionals who need to be licensed in the state to perform these particular things. I'm saying if you do it, you would lose your license.
Okay. I mean, I see the difference.
I think it's kind of like a dry county thing. Like certain counties don't allow alcohol to be served or sold in certain stores. I live in a former dry county. Okay. So you couldn't get alcohol here. You'd have to go somewhere else. And if somebody was serving alcohol or trying to sell alcohol, that they would go to jail for that. So you would have to go to another county in order to buy your alcohol and bring it back. So I think that's what the loophole kind of is with this type of law is it's not illegal to have the alcohol. It's illegal to sell the alcohol in that county. So it's like that's how they're getting around that, to make abortion illegal without making abortion illegal. You can have an abortion. You just can't have it in this state because it's illegal for them to perform the abortion. It's insane.
Right. But if it were also illegal to, sorry, my dog is going to start playing with his toy now. If it were also, it gets into so much like, no one ever talks about the people who were forced to give birth.
Right.
That and the trauma that is, and the permanent physical, psychological changes that is. No one talks about that when they are passing abortion restriction laws that are not based in science, that put more people's health and lives in danger. I had, and I talk about this all the time, but I had a case in residency of a woman who wanted an abortion, could not get one, and died in childbirth, leaving her 5 kids orphans.
Wow.
Did somebody commit murder there? Like, in my mind, someone killed her because she could not have an abortion, whether that was a legislator, a governor, a president, I don't know.
Yeah.
But her autonomy was violated.
No, I actually agree. The effect is, you're 100% correct. The effect of her autonomy being violated is 100% correct. But I also think, if you think about the means, the counter argument would be, these people can get abortions. They just can't get them here. Maybe it may be more expensive because at the end of the day, the conservatives will talk about, you're talking about convenience over access, right? Because it's more convenient to get one in Alabama if you live in Alabama. But that doesn't mean you can't get one, because you just go to New York, for instance, to get one. Even though it now becomes substantially more expensive, it's still there.
Right.
Right. It is about access. It's everything in healthcare is about access. It's the point that was made earlier that you made, Nate, about, when people argue, isn't this sort of just population control for a certain population? No, when you deny access to contraception to a specific population like that, there's again a systemic effect and a ripple effect of what these racist and misogynist systems, create. So yeah, it is an access issue, but when it's access to healthcare is what we're talking about. And so these laws are denying access to a very safe outpatient procedure based on no science, based on no facts, and based on historical feelings regarding women's bodies, pregnancy, et cetera, et cetera. And where, you know, where does it stop? You know, Mel asked earlier, where does it stop? Apparently, you know, maybe it only stops at pregnant people because that's as far as people are willing to go. But, you know, that's okay because it's just pregnancy. No big deal. I mean, and then that's a whole nother discussion. The blasé attitude toward pregnancy and what it means to be pregnant and give birth also just blows my mind, but I digress.
No, I agree with you 110%. I'm dealing with a sick child now, and every time I look at it, I'm like, oh my God. But I think the key point here is that this is all about control. This is all about controlling women's bodies through legislation, and let's not make any bones about it. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think so. I think I agree with that. It's the whole argument about it being a means of population control and stuff like that. Well, you are controlling a population by not allowing access to contraception and safe abortion, safe access to abortion. So if you make it extremely difficult for certain pregnant people to gain access to that, they don't have the resources to go to another state. They don't have the resources to find another county, or, you know, they can't afford that. You're controlling that population. So in that regard, that's population control. And if this person doesn't gain access to a safe abortion, could be life-threatening. I mean, just so there's that.
And I also want to go ahead.
No, I said nobody wins by having someone forced to have children that they can't take care of, that they can't manage, and they can't afford. You know, nobody wins. Society actually loses. But I think this is more of a religious context where, you know, it's an evil, it's immoral, that type of thing, because they always coach to this killing babies, but it's not. You're right. It's simply healthcare, and it's access to adequate healthcare. And if we keep narrowing the point where that's it, then I think we'll be more okay with the argument.
I mean, it's the arguments put forward embarrassingly put forward in state houses and places of very official, you know, processes that should be revered and respected, but like they're putting forward arguments that are similar to the arguments put forward in why women shouldn't vote because women's brains are smaller. I mean, that is the level of logic being used to put forward these bills, and they're passed and they take effect, and it is no more than, you know, if she floats, she's a witch. If she sinks, she's not. Like that is the logic being used. And no one is saying, whoa. Maybe we don't burn her at the stake because she floated. Maybe there's something more to this scenario.
Oh my God.
It's mind-boggling.
Look at the anti-evolution laws. Look at the anti-evolution laws and the anti-science laws that are coming out now. It's the same exact thing. You have uninformed people who have these religious preferences, and it's destroying, you know, what academia and what anybody with any intelligence would know to be not true. You know, the earth is not flat, but somebody's going to pass a law saying we got to teach the earth is flat. Teach the controversy.
Did you see that Frisbee with the water inside thing? I don't know. I think they've got a compelling argument.
Oh my goodness. It's like, okay, so in my job, I'm back in academia. And so a lot of the people that I work with this particular organization, 70% are poverty line. 70% are poverty line. And so I'm actively trying to help them be successful in gaining in STEM academia and their careers and that sort of thing. So they're trying to get into like some sciencey type of program, whether it's in medicine, somewhere in medicine, or, you know, they're trying to get, you know, into grad school to go and do research and that sort of thing. But it's like what they have to face just just the people that are on the poverty line, what they have to go through and what they have to face just to gain access to an education, let alone, decent food, and a lot of the obstacles that they have to overcome are stuff that I don't have. I don't have the same obstacles now, given I was borderline poverty growing up. So there's some of that in trying to overcome some sexist hurdles associated with academia. Okay, so there's some of that. But what they go through is so different from my life experience that I can't imagine taking Planned Parenthood from them, or any small viable resource that could help them be successful in just living, let alone, trying to pull themselves out of poverty. And so where I work, it's what we do. It's one of our goals is going from poverty to prosperity. So we're trying really hard to get people educated and move from that, and just so they have highly specific and specialized types of obstacles that we try to address to help them overcome. And it's like, it just blows my mind that here's yet another thing that it could be taken from them. I mean, a lot of these people are just one pregnancy away from dropping out of high school, or not out of high school, but out of college, one pregnancy away from not, finishing a course, or one pregnancy away from, death. So it's just another thing that I'm going to have to address to try to help these people be successful in what their life goals are.
Absolutely. And it's a known tactic. It's a known tactic for keeping the rich rich, keeping the poor poor. It is it should come as no surprise that someone who has a child is going to have more expenses, is going to struggle more, is going to have those types of hurdles to overcome, whereas someone without a child does not have those hurdles. Yeah. It does tie in, and it's nothing anybody wants to admit to, because heaven forbid you say, that's what the goal is, but let's, be honest, that's a fact, especially when our society doesn't provide parental leave, when it doesn't as a standard, an unquestionable standard. An unquestionable standard of, oh, my kid's sick, I have to stay home and work home from work. Oh, sorry, you're fired.
Yeah.
I mean, if we valued, again, children and child rearing, that would not be an issue. If we valued healthcare, that would not be an issue.
Oh, gosh.
And I also think even after the child is born, it gets so crazy, because after the child is born, then it's like the mother has to take care of them, and the fathers can just walk away and cut a check. You know what I'm saying? And there's more to raising the kid than just paying child support. You know what I mean? And it seems like our government and our legislators don't understand that.
Yeah, they don't. They don't seem to. Well, no, I think they do understand that, but they don't care.
They understand it and they want it that way because it favors them. The system is in place the way it is because they win.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you want to secede power? That sounds silly. With power and money, why would you want to give that up?
I mean, yeah. And then you get the other side of that, where you have the dads that want to be involved and the courts won't let them. And so it's like, this is a no-win situation. So
no, it's awful. And we have, and you make a very good point about the sexism in the justice system as well, because plenty of fathers are amazing and plenty of mothers are not. The system should do what's best for the child, as opposed to what historically some philosopher or priest or whatever said once upon a time about motherhood or fatherhood. It's, again, an ingrained system where I think, I mean, it's designed to keep those in power who are in power. It all goes to that.
But that's what it's always been about.
Yeah. It's mind blowing because it's not just a simple call. There's so many other things that are interwoven into the overall problem that it's not just abortion. Let's get rid of that. It's tied to lots of other things. When you look at the fact as a former high school teacher, I had a student, her mother was in prison. Her mother was in prison. She was living with her grandparents while her mother was serving time. She gave me a lot of flack. Oh God. She was very angry, and she was upset with me. But I knew she was smart. I'm like, you can do this work. You can do this. Just power through, get this work done. I didn't know this, but she was going home every night to a grandfather who beat her every single night. The police had been called several times. The guidance counselor of the school was on her speed dial. And so she would be like, do you have somewhere you can stay? Just run out of the house. Do you have somewhere you can stay? Department of Human Services for Child Protective Services, they'd been out there several times. There's no other place for her to go. She's got a grandmother there, a grandfather there. Where are they going to put her? They just left her there. So it's like, there's nothing at all about any of this where people are actually interested in helping kids. I have yet to see that, because the school lunches, now ketchup is a vegetable. It's like, just the rollbacks on that. It's just.
What do you guys think about the religious aspect of this thing? Because that's what it really comes down to. Because the major argument is it's religious based. The Catholic Church, the Protestants, the right. They always talk use a religious argument. I think it's more infested in this whole moral, that Jesus and Christianity, than actual science and any type of real methodology. You know what I mean?
Right, but Jesus never said oppress women. and Jesus never said
but women were
right, but like back in those times, women were oppressed. So I think this goes even before religion. I mean, my whole theory on the thing, that if we're gonna just lay it out, the basics, how we got here. Organized religions tend to be misogynistic, based in misogyny. Why is that? Well, the physical gender dimorphism, men tend to be bigger and stronger. So there's the power dynamic. Then you take religion and you mix in a little bit of fear of losing power and control. So who's got power and control? Well, obviously folks who can make people can be very powerful. So we should oppress them and make sure that they do what we want, because that's a thing. So sexuality is shamed and negatively, put in a negative light, so that women don't just go out and get pregnant and have people that, then will do what they say. Again, I think it really stems down to the shaming of female sexuality in order to control those who can make people, like in a nutshell. And everything that came after that is a repercussion. So the religiosity this is all based off of is from that misogyny and that fear of losing control, I think. That's just me.
Well, I'm inclined to agree. I think the organizations who can control the baby making, they want to make certain. I kind of often compare this to lions. I don't know if you guys are familiar with lions. Like you have the head lion, it's a male and it's in the pride, and then there's all the women around, the women lions. And so when another lion comes and challenges the male lion, if the new one wins, he immediately goes through and kills all the children, and then attempts to start getting the lionesses pregnant. It's like they want to control whose babies they are. It's like this weird thing. It's like, I have to control this woman's uterus to have only the babies that I want her to have, preferably when she's married in a particular scenario. Okay, Nate has to head to the doctor. That's cool. If you need to drop out, that's all right, Nate. I appreciate you sticking around as long as you have. So it's just another, it's like, we have to control the baby making person to be certain that they're having children only for, am I gone? Or am I frozen? Oh, no.
No.
Okay.
No, we can still hear you. I just was saying my
Okay, no problem. So yeah,
ahead,
I kind of see it as that. So Nate, you got to go?
No. My wife took the baby in, so I'm in the waiting room. I don't know if you guys can hear the music in the background.
Okay.
You're
Well,
fine,
sure.
Nate.
It's cool. Stick around with us. So it's weird. I think it's just they have to control the baby maker. And I agree a lot with as far as with your religion. I had to think, they're not being very Jesus-like because they're not taking care of the babies after. If you're going to claim religion, why aren't you taking care of the children afterwards?
I mean, how many Christians are professing anti-Jesus rhetoric is like a lot. You go on social media and so-called Christians are calling for my assassination, for example. I don't think Christ would be in line with that sort of reasoning. So this is all, it's all a guise, right? It's all cloak and dagger, and it's all sort of like, we're going to claim religion, we're going to claim moral superiority by forcing people to give birth against their will.
Mm.
Feel like that's not a morally superior stance. I really feel like it's not.
No. I've asked people in the chat to kind of, if they have questions, just to tag me. I've had a few interesting things. I want to point out something Nether had said. He mentioned, I think the biggest biological factor in the rise of patriarchal societies is that humans have an insane rate of death in childbirth. Without medical intervention, it's 1 in 5 births kills the mother. Do you have thoughts on that, Dr. Torres?
Yes, I have many thoughts on that. So, I mean, is that a global number? Is that it? It doesn't.
I'm not certain.
Honestly, it doesn't really matter because, and historically, before medical technologies that we have now and interventions that we have, childbirth killed a lot more people, moms and babies included. So with advancement of medical technology, yes, absolutely, we've helped save lives. But that is part of the whole thing that my spiel is that people take pregnancy and birth as this thing you do. Like, no biggie, it's natural, right? But it's a big deal. And by the way, cancer is also natural. Pneumonia, also natural. We use soaps to protect ourselves from natural things all the time. So calling something natural doesn't mean it's safe. And it doesn't mean it's something that you should just do out of some sort of philosophical obligation to something. I mean, childbirth and pregnancy carry real health and life risks. And when we minimize that, and as a society, culturally, we minimize it, And that's on purpose. That's to make, abortion this monumentally evil thing. And on the same, based on the same logic, then childbirth is just a thing that you're supposed to do. No big deal. Yeah, you might die, but it's just what you do. Like, as a woman of reproductive age, it's just what you do. Sorry. I mean,
what you're supposed
them's
to
the
do.
breaks.
Them's the breaks. I looked up, I was trying to see if I could find that particular statistic for Nether. But I've got information from the World Health Organization. About 295,000 women died during and following pregnancy and childbirth in 2017.
Yeah.
About 94%.
Wow, that's crazy.
The vast majority, 94%, occurred in low resource settings, and most could have been prevented.
Yep, that all sounds true.
Yeah, so that's key facts. If you want to go on the World Health Organization, they have maternal mortality. They have a facts sheet detail with their citations. And so they've got trends in maternal mortality. There's a study that was done, 2017 estimates by World Health Organization, UNICEF, UNFPA, World Bank Group, and the United Nations Population Division, Geneva World Health Organization in 2019. So do check that out if you want some more information. We had another question from the chat. Let's see. This is from Exiled. Will you ask if your guests have heard the argument for preventing unwanted pregnancy and abortion made by Gabrielle Blair, known as Design Mom? I'm not certain I have heard her. Have either of you heard her?
Made by whom?
Her name?
Yeah, I've not heard it, no.
Gabrielle Blair. Her name is Gabrielle Blair, so I'm not certain. Maybe she has a video, so have to have a look. So no, we haven't checked that out.
Oh,
Exile.
Design Mom. I feel like I have encountered this person. Let's see. She's at Design Mom on Twitter.
Yeah, Design Mom. I don't know.
I feel like I'm following her.
Exile can help us out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
She says.
Oh, yep, there she goes.
Exile, tell us what the argument is.
Her pinned tweet, if I can, at Design Mom from September 13th of 18, she says, "I'm a mother of 6 and a Mormon. I have a good understanding of arguments surrounding abortion, religious and otherwise. I've been listening to men grandstand about women's reproductive rights, and I'm convinced men actually have zero interest in stopping abortion. Here's why." And then she goes through a thread, and this is from her pinned tweet. And I retweeted it, most likely because this thread is accurate and amazing. She is the one who I think is best known for saying, by the by, men are responsible for 100% of abortions. I'm pretty sure that's who this person is.
Yes.
Probably not the first person to say it, but it went a little bit more popularized. I'm sorry. So what was the question regarding her again?
What do you think of her? I guess essentially, what do you think of her stance? I sent a link. There's designmom.com/Twitter thread abortion. I put a link here in the Skype call. And Exile put it in the side chat on Twitter. She linked it, so those of you who are watching, you can go check it out. So she just wanted to know if you had heard the argument. So yeah, I guess. Yeah, so 100% of men are 100% responsible for unwanted pregnancies.
Right. And there's no pregnancy without sperm, so...
Nate, we're going to blame you. You're the man in this call.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay. I've had thousands of years of dominance, so this one phone call is not gonna hurt me.
You really have. I mean, my God, just give up the reins for a minute, would you, please? Speaking of which, actually, let's keep this in perspective, because this is something I am meaning to write about, but I have not had the energy to. We've had the vote for 100 years. Men have been voting for millennia.
Yeah.
Again, let's keep this in perspective. Men have been voting since BC times. And we in this country have 100 years. And I think, did the UK come after us with their suffragists? I feel like they were even later, but
I think they came afterwards. Yeah.
right. So less than a century of half of the population being seen as equally citizen-like and having an equal voice, which we don't still. Let's not make any mistakes about that, but at least we can vote. Let's keep that in perspective, shall we? When we're talking about all of these anti-abortion laws and all of the systemic racism and misogyny, yeah, that's a thing.
That is a
Remember
thing.
that.
There were people just 20 years ago who were as old as how long we've had for the vote. So, you know, I would hope that they're still around at 100, but it's unlikely. But there were probably people, you know, hanging around like, yeah, I was around when we couldn't vote. I was born before the point we couldn't vote. Oh, and thank you, Learning with Suge did a super chat. Sorry I missed this. Such an important topic. Thanks, Mel, Nate, and Dr. Torres. Well, thank you, Learning with Suge.
Suge is my man. He's always so great. Listen, unfortunately, I got to run real quick, guys. But listen,
That's
this is
okay.
such a great. It's always great talking to you, Dr. Torres. It's wonderful. And thanks again for having me on, Mel.
Likewise.
Anytime.
Thank you so much, Nate.
Thank you. I think we should, we're over an hour now. We should probably wrap this up anyway. I know you're on call, so thank you for spending time with us on this show, on this episode again. Guys, if you want to, I've got links to Dr. Torres' website as well as her Twitter. So do check that out. Nate's link to his YouTube channel and his Twitter are there as well. I'll take maybe one or two more questions if we had. Trying to see if I have any more questions.
Can
yes.
I just, I don't know if this is,
Sure.
I don't know what proper etiquette of the YouTubes is, but I wanted to bring people's attention to a podcast that I hold dear, if that's okay.
Absolutely, go for it.
So it's Boom Lawyered, and it's by Jessica Piccolo and Imani Gandhi. They are on Twitter as well at Angry Black Lady and at Hegemami. They do Boom Lawyered, the podcast. They're actually putting out a special sort of series on breaking down Roe v. Wade and how it came to be. So apropos to, you know, our discussion today, they focus on the reproductive justice movement. So their podcasts they're all about these abortion laws and how insane they are, but breaking down the legalese actually for those of us who don't speak it, like myself, but I'm getting dangerously educated and I think that's scary. So it's called Boom Lawyered. I'm really waiting. I'm anxiously waiting to hear them drop this series. So breaking down Roe v. Wade with actual audio from, you know, the hearings and whatever you call those things, but it'll be super interesting. They say things like, you know, they dropped a clip of one attorney, I think it might have been the attorney general, kind of wavering about, well, the life of the mother may be, I guess, important. Like, just like, whoa. So check it out.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so check out that podcast. I'm trying one few last questions. Somebody had mentioned Be in Mindful 71 said, if at the time of being able to conceive, all women had their tubes tied or something similar to it, and then when ready to have children had the procedure reversed, that's an extremely invasive procedure, less invasive than a vasectomy. You're talking about
More
actual
invasive.
Abdominal going in, you know, it's not an outpatient thing like
It's more
a
invasive than
vasectomy.
a vasectomy. Yeah.
Yes. So that
mean,
that wouldn't be good.
If you want to go the forced sterilization route, here's what you do. And I am not a proponent of this, but here's if people really wanted to make abortions not a thing, this is what would happen, right? Mm-hmm. And the right should be all about this. So you have people store sperm in a sperm bank. Okay?
Yeah.
Vasectomies. Okay? Then, of course my work would be calling me. Then you have...
It's okay.
You have your sperm, right? But you can't use it until you want to.
Right.
Done. No more like abortion on demand. I mean, so here's the thing though. Like Mother Nature will ensure that there's a need for abortion. Mother Nature will make sure that that's a thing, but at least you don't have all these people running around having sex and getting pregnant and knocked up and all this stuff. Right? So that's a thing.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's a good option. So I know you have to probably go and get that. So it's all right. So Dr. Torres is on call. So I appreciate her spending time with us and having this chat. Nate's had to run. He's had a sick child. So we've managed to pull this together and it's been awesome. So thank you guys in the chat. If you want to continue with the conversation, I do have a Discord. I believe the link is in the description, but you're welcome to carry the conversation over to there. The chat's been pretty heated up. And one last thing, don't forget, you can get points for your own t-shirt. This is our response to a hater. So there you go. You can get the top 3 viewers will get their own t-shirt. It's a limited edition. It's to poke fun at certain not very nice people. So there you go. Anyway, let's see. I don't think I have any more questions, and I guess it's time to probably wrap this up. So, Dr. Torres, thanks for being on the show today, and I appreciate
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, guys, be certain to like, share, and subscribe. Follow Dr. Torres on Twitter. She posts all kinds of wonderful information to kind of help, educate yourselves on reproductive rights. And she's very personable and will happily answer questions for you. So be certain to ask her questions if you want to learn stuff. Broady Nate on Twitter as well if you have questions about law. So any last thoughts, Dr. Torres, before we go?
I think that we all need to work together to make sure every human being is valued and that they get to make their own decisions about the health and life risks that they want to undergo.
I'm inclined to agree. So I guess we will see you guys next time on This Week in BS. I'll be back on Saturday morning with my Saturday morning science. I don't know what I'm talking about. So if you guys want to send me a topic, I will throw that out there. All right. So thank you again, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.
Thanks, Mel. Bye.